like to reconvene the public session. Will the city attorney please give a report on our actions taken in closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There were no reportable actions.
Thank you. We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Bash, and then the invocation by Chaplain Bruce Smith. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I appreciate this opportunity. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we welcome you tonight and ask for your presence in this room. Be with us tonight, Lord, and I pray for your blessing, wisdom, and guidance on the government of this city of Norco. Lord, may government turn to you first as decisions are made, policy established, and may you be the most used tool in their tool bag. May they lean upon your understanding in all things, Lord, and not just on their own. Lord, watch over this very special place, bring peace and harmony to it, protect its deputies and firefighters as they protect us. Bless our elected officials as they govern over us, and may your presence be felt by all who live here. We pray for and welcome you here, dear Jesus. We pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain. Okay, we've got a presentation tonight for the Girl Scout Gold Award. Elsie, you want to meet me at the podium? Good. So this is a good thing tonight. The City Council would like to recognize Girl Scout Elsie Ehrenberg, on her outstanding achievement of completing her Girl Scout Gold Award project, Music in the Mountains. The Gold Award is the highest honor a Girl Scout can achieve, and we want to congratulate you on this accomplishment. We're so very proud of you. Say a few words if you'd like, or sing a song. But the Norco City Council applauds you for earning this distinguished Gold Award, the highest achievement attainable within the Girl Scouts of the USA. Congratulations.
Do you want to say something? She doesn't have much of a voice. She created a music program to be used at our camp and at our environmental ed programs, and to be used by all kinds of people, but really reaching out to help people understand the importance of music in their life. And so we're super proud of her, and she'll be teaching it up at camp this summer as well as camp staff. So I'm a proud mom. And she's lost her voice. Thank you. Right here, stand right there.
No, I'll get a picture.
Oh, we'll just do it right up.
I'll get a picture.
Right, she needs more patches. They're on the other vests.
More pins.
Ready? 1, 2, 3. Very nice.
Thank you again.
So sweet. We'll see you soon. Thank you. So good to see you.
Congratulations. It was your mom's idea, so like to call on Councilmember Bash to start our, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I've been practicing for this too. I'm going to call on our city attorney to lead us in the workshop on the proposed Assembly Bill 1061.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as opposed to a workshop, this is more just a introduction, presentation, notification. This was a late-breaking item. Late last week, we learned that there is a new bill. It is not a law yet. It is a new bill floating around that would remove the protection for historic districts from something called an SB 9 lot conversion. Now, SB 9 is known as the fourplex law, and how SB 9 works is it allows ministerially, which means we don't have discretion, it allows ministerially for a property owner to take a larger residential lot, split it into two smaller lots, and then place a duplex on each for properties that are located in residential zones. The original SB 9 had an exception that said that it doesn't apply to properties in historic districts. The city of Norco had already created an equestrian historic district, so we were protected from this law, which essentially destroys the residential character of regular single-family neighborhoods and has even worse impact on equestrian lifestyle neighborhoods, impact on large lots, impact on animal keeping. So we were in the clear for a while. What we just learned, and in fact what Councilmember Bash learned and alerted me to, was that there is a new bill being proposed that would remove the historic district exception and change it to historic landmark. So in other words, if the bill passes, properties in historic districts are no longer exempt from SB 9 lot splits, only historic landmarks. So we're looking at what we can do to protect the lifestyle, the equestrian lifestyle of the city. This is obviously just a bill at this point, so it's in the early stages, but it's important to get ahead of this and to start thinking down the road. A couple of proposed responses is, number one, fight the bill, and that's our lobbying effort through the league. But the other is take a look at historic landmarks. We have a deep tradition of the equestrian lifestyle that goes back a long way, and we have probably one of the largest, most comprehensive trail systems that you can find anywhere in the state, in the nation, anywhere that I've heard of. So we're looking at what it would take to designate all trails and all parks as historic landmarks. And as it was explained to me, a equestrian lifestyle requires three things. It requires large animal keeping lots, trails going past all those lots, and parks with horse amenities to have the entire cohesive type of lifestyle experience. So we're also looking at what it would take to designate lots of 20,000 square feet and above as historic landmarks. And we're just in the preliminary stages of this. What would it take to designate them? And then if we could designate them, what would that mean for the persons who currently own them? So this is just an introduction to say that we are aware of the bill. We're taking a look at what we can do about it. There are potential solutions, remedies, defenses that we could take, and we're going to look at the pros and cons of these and bring it back to council in the near future.
Kevin, any questions, or would you like to make some comments?
I'll just make some comments. So Bill Wolkman's working on this. He's crafting something for us. The fight is twofold. I've already contacted Western Regional Council of Governments. What this is really doing is they're trying to strip away more local control. And so WRCOG, I'll meet Monday, and I'm going to ask to agendize it. It's already listed on their watch list. Cal Cities they've pledged to fight this also. I've talked to Corona, I've talked to Eastvale, they're all on board. They want to fight even though they're not equestrian communities. The second piece of this is if it does pass, it actually went through the initial committee stage. Totally, the Democrats all voted for it and the Republicans all voted against it. But unfortunately, there weren't a lot of Republicans. But the point is we're not sure where it's going. And so the next thing that has to happen is we're going to have to tweak our code so that we include the word landmark. Landmark, landmark, landmark. And Bill came up with something just yesterday or day before yesterday where he was sort of like, I'm not sure how to do this, and he came up with something just a couple days ago where he sort of, that light bulb went off and he went, I know how to put this thing together. So I thought he was going to be here tonight, but I guess you're going to have him come at another time, or?
We will. Once we have something more concrete for council to consider, we'll bring him in to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we can, because the deal is the SB 9 and 10 included this historic district statute in it to protect historic districts. That was the trade-off. And I wasn't aware of that until just recently. Colin pointed it out to me, and then I talked to the Cal Cities people. But that was the promise. So I think we just have to go forward, because obviously our historic district is key. And then along with that, I also think that we need to be able to make a case that we are looking at creating low-income housing, which is what we're doing on Sierra. So I think that we are building arguments to say, you know what, this is Norco, we're not cookie cutter. We are doing things that are out of the norm of our zoning to try to house 30 homeless people, to house people in different ways. I mean, there's another idea that I have that I think might actually work really well too. A very large place that's not in compliance. So I'm very hopeful for this, and Colin has just jumped on it. So I really want to thank you for your effort in this.
Thea, any comments? Questions?
Mainly just comments, just how important that this really is, and that our trails, I kind of see them that could possibly be landmarks because of our trail system. And I'm very eager to see what's going to be coming forward. And I'm all in for fighting this. And I think we have a really strong case just because of all of the history that Norco is about. It is about, you know, horses and homesteading and agriculture, and I'm sure that we can find landmarks to really set some stone in that also. So, thank you.
Councilmember Bowen?
Yeah, if you look at the horse trails, they're actually a part of the property. It's the right of way. So if we do make the horse trails landmarks, that will be a better sale to make the properties landmarks because they're attached to it. So I'm full speed ahead.
Robin? Anything? I had a couple of questions and then a statement also. With those components of 20,000 square foot lots, trails, does open space tie into this at all?
Yes.
Park, yeah, when you said parks, so open space.
Thank you.
And then when we craft this and we tie trails into it, I would consider trails to be linear open space. That maybe when we start crafting this a little bit. And then I just wanted to bring council up to a little thing that I've been working on. Colin, I've been sharing this information with Colin. This is Senate Bill 322. This is Senator Menjivar. This is a group that I've been working with. It's a proposed bill. It's an equestrian group from the Sylmar to the Burbank area, council members from Burbank, and this state senator. And what we're trying to accomplish in this proposed Senate bill is to take towns like Norco, right? Equestrian heritage communities. And I've had some, Councilmember Bash and Bill Wilkman have shared some information. And I think, you know, it's starting to roll, it's starting to move forward. When you talk to Bill about this, can we kind of look at maybe developing that along with like historic landmark properties and equestrian heritage community that would kind of make it more encompass with agriculture, animal keeping, equestrian lifestyle? And maybe we should try to package the whole thing with it. So.
Yes. We can also talk to our land use consultant who's working on our updates now also, if that's a good time to tie that in.
All right.
Real quick. quick?
Yeah.
I want to thank
Certainly,
Dina,
Kevin.
because what Dana's done with the Heritage Room is that she's made it so that everything's at her fingertips. So if we ever do get into confrontation, she has it right there. And so the work you've done over there and what that Matt has done and Amy is awesome. It's really super important. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wish that I could have spent a little bit more time on this particular subject. So when I was doing some research, and again, I didn't have a lot of time to do it, but is there any way to add like an equestrian and agricultural preservation element to the general plan? Would that help on anything like this?
That wouldn't make it a landmark, but looking more broadly, there was actually discussion of doing that exact thing on 6th Street on the commercial properties. There's discussion about incorporating that into some of the properties to satisfy the state mandate. So that is something we've actually talked to our land use consultants about, and we'll make sure to loop you into any further discussions we have with the land use consultant. But that is something that's in the works with our land use consultant, is having an overlay that talks about some shared farming, some agricultural, some incentives to do more agricultural, particularly in the commercial zones.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. The update, and you'll be coming back to us.
Yes.
All right. Kevin, would you like to start with reports on regional boards and what you've been doing with your life?
Yeah, I went to the Cal Cities Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee, and I chair it, and it was really an opportunity to see a lot of cities and where they're coming from. It's very interesting. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, they're all mad at Sacramento, and so that's pretty interesting. We had some really good sessions. Couple of interesting things. I'm not going to go into a lot of them, but right now there's a tug of war between the finance department for the state of California and the governor. Finance department says we're $2 billion in debt. We have a deficit of $2 billion. And the governor is saying that we have a $16.9 billion reserve and $363 million surplus. And so I'd like to know who's right on that. We had Larry Cosmont as one of our speakers. He was talking about housing, and one of the things that he said and pressed home is he said, it's coming, and you have to be ready. You've got to be ready for the housing that's coming at us. I don't know how we're going to do that Norco style. The other thing that came out is cities across California are badly struggling. They're all right now pretty much all at a deficit. The other thing they talked about that I really pushed with another one of the speakers is, and we're right on point with this, is that everything now is about place, because if it was left up to people, they would live in their house, work in their house, buy stuff from their house, and the only way to get them out of their house is to go to a place that they want to go to. And Norco we're right in there planning a lot of that kind of stuff. There is a new law, and I can't think of the name of the person, but there was a council person that was very involved in early talks with the developer. And things went south, the developer sued, and the council person was sued, the city was sued, and they won $24 million. So one of the recommendations now is that we as council people should not actually be involved with discussions, early discussions, nice discussions, peaceful discussions with developers, because they can always bite us in the rear end. One of the things that came up in this is that, and maybe we need to look at this, there is a ton of money for the solar, different things that we kind of, we maybe don't believe in, but the thing is that there's a lot of money in it that can be attached to all kinds of goods and services in your city, and that's one of the things we might want to look at. There are several things, and I'm not going to go into all of it, but there's quite a few things that we're looking to oppose. I also got a very, very interesting idea, and I'd actually heard this before. There's a big move, I have to be careful how I say this, but there are certain types of hotels where people stay a long time, and I'm speaking like in Pasadena or Malibu. And what happens is they violate, and some, for whatever reason, what happens is there are companies that look for these and they want to purchase them, particularly veterans groups. And so that's something that maybe we just kind of think about, but it's a huge move in the state of California. Long-term hotels that are being converted into veterans. And what's nice about these is that they're very, very heavily regulated by the state and by the federal government. So I'm not sure how we can swing something into that. And then the other thing is Caltrans is taking on a new attitude. They want to become more user-friendly to the cities and to the counties. And what was funny is when the guy from Caltrans said that, we all laughed. And so it was kind of interesting. And then the last part, well, there's a couple things. One, if you want to have a mural painted in your city, you have to have a certified muralist, and that muralist has to have 4 years of experience. And then there's an attorney who we know well who's banging on our door at the moment. I will not say his name, but he has prompted someone from Huntington Beach, a council person, who is claiming they did not know that they were engaged in very expensive lawsuits. And they sit on the council. And so what has to happen is people like Colin, if we get into a lawsuit, he has to make sure through certain rules that we know exactly how much money is being spent, like on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis. Because the contention is the council people don't know how much money is being spent, and they're being boondoggled by the lawyers just trying to jack up fees. So we have to watch Colin and Erica. There's a lot of other things. It was a really, really good session. And I guess I'll close with this. I was really honored that I was asked to apply for the state board. I don't think I'm going to do it, but it was really nice to be asked following that meeting. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Kevin?
On March 27th, I attended the RTA board meeting. It was pretty much just a business as usual. It was a lot of receive and file and nothing much to report. Thank you.
Greg?
Yeah, the Northwestern Mosquito Vector Control District, they were given slideshows, but they're just gearing things up for the mosquito season that is going to be coming. And they're fully on board, they're fully staffed now. And according to their statistics from years past, mosquitoes are down 65%. With that being said, doesn't mean that we can't have a big rain or a big change of it, because you just, like they said, you never can know what will cause a big mosquito outbreak. But with that being said, they are gearing up. And then for the California Rehabilitation Center advisory, I was there with Sue Bacon, and Riverside City College was there. And it was really nice. They gave us a tour. They have a dog training program. It's the old nurses' quarters where they used to house all the nurses, where they used to stay. And now they have 4 guys in one room with bunks with a dog in each one. And I don't know how they did it, but they're all yellow labs. There's not one brown chocolate one in there. They're all yellow. But their programs with the RCC is doing a phenomenal job. Those guys are getting AA and bachelor's degrees from different colleges. They have programs, where they're teaching them to go in the auto industry, AC, you name it. It's phenomenal when you really think about it. The big thing, they just were awarded, and I want to make sure I say this right, the #2 prison in California. But like the guy said, the only reason they got #2, one of the guys judging it, was in the other prison, and they got #1. He kind of smirked about that. But at the same time, they have phenomenal what they're doing is they're housing people. All the people that are in school, that are going to school and going to trade schools, they're all housing them in one unit. And they're finding out that if they house people in similar ideals or directions they're going, they have barracks that have zero complaints, zero. And when they were telling us about, they didn't show us, they were telling us about statistics of what they had, is their complaints, their write-ups, their everything has dropped in some barracks down to zero, which was, nobody has that. No fights, no complaints, and across the board, they've dropped almost half in the other barracks. And he did reassure, and it was brought up, which I brought it up, anybody that's over there is 10 years or less, and they're being scheduled to be processed back into the public. And people have made comments about, they had murderers there, they had this, that, or whatever, lifers. There is nobody in there that is doing life. If you're in there, it's the last 10 years of your system, and you're being transitioned out. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that it's still a rehabilitation center. And I worked with them and talked to the warden and quite a few different people out there, and they would love to start have their guys come down and get a booth, with their CAL FIRE people to come down and get a booth, and also they would love to bring their dogs in and have a booth, not the convicts, just the guards. But with that being said, we're working on that. That's all I got.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the mayor and I had an annual meeting with Supervisor Spiegel, kind of an update and making sure we're sharing information. And Supervisor Spiegel has always been incredibly supportive of Norco and just reminded us of some opportunities potentially to work more with her office. And then I met with Glenda Chavez from Waste Management to kind of put together the class for the folks that are going to be the initial Join the Flock cohort of folks. And so that'll be, it'll be in the month of April. We'll have that class for our first group of folks that are getting their baby chicks and all of their stuff to start their life with chickens. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Robin. I did want to mention the other Saturday on the 22nd, the residential cleanup. Wanted to thank all of council for volunteering, participating, and all the hard work by staff and former staff. It was extremely successful. As the Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, had an update meeting with Supervisor Spiegel. On the 27th, I attended the 26th Annual Unity Awards Luncheon in Corona, and this is the Unity group, and the awards given, but it's just all volunteers, and that it was fun. And then on the 29th, Councilmember Bash, Commission Member Susan Bowen, and myself, we attended the annual Peppermint Ridge Gala and fundraiser, and it was a kick. Another good organization, and I forgot his name. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Yeah, Kevin and I had an enjoyable time, and that's all I have at this point. And with that, Dana, can we move into public comments, please?
Yes. This is the time when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding the consent calendar or matters not on the agenda may be heard. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. The governmental body shall not discuss or act relative to any general public comment. My first speaker card is Rocky Lostetter.
Good evening, Rocky.
Good afternoon, everybody. I got to know all of you pretty well over the last couple months. And I'm here tonight to ask for a reconsideration and for a vote of the issue that I have with my pavers. And I was at the meeting with the Trails Commission, was like 2 weeks ago or so, and they asked me why I didn't bring my next door neighbor for him to say his piece. Well, I brought him tonight, and I think he gave you guys some pictures and things. But when I first addressed this with you, in front of the board here, the very first one that came out to check it out in the morning was Councilman Bash, and I really appreciated that he came out right away to look at it. And we talked about, you know, different things, and he said that I would need a vote of the council, and the majority of if I got the majority of the vote, the majority vote, then I could probably keep the pavers the way they are, because it's a safety issue. I can't stress that enough, because I had a horse hurt when there was a 6-inch deep gully that eroded down there, and I got him on tape of limping, and I should have made a copy of it so you guys could see that. But fortunately, he was only laid up for a couple weeks, and then he rehabbed through it. Dr. Dave across the street got him going, so I was very fortunate to have that. So I'm just looking, if I take these pavers out, that gully is going to start again, and it's going to be a nightmare again. We have watched several days. I've watched horses go up and down there, and they do not even come close to the pavers. They stay right in the middle. There's 12 feet of trail like they're supposed to be, and they don't even come close to the pavers. And then Sam said I could move the pavers towards the ones that are in the front, towards the street. But again, it's still 12 feet of horse trail there that they use, and I mean that was a nice gesture by him, but that's still a lot of work to do. To have that, to move those, because I'm going to have to jackhammer them out because they've been in there for a couple years now. So I think that in your packet there that Mr. Pullen brought to give you, there's just down the end of the street, there's a guy put it's all pavered the whole way across the trail. Don't know when he did it, but it's pavers the whole way across the trail. I don't believe there's ever been any incidents of them tripping on that or sliding or sliding or, skidding on it or something like that. So I'm not real sure on that, but anyway, I don't see they're a good thing. They're not a bad thing. They're a safety issue, and I believe that they should stay. And all I want to ask you if you guys would take a vote on it. So
Thank you, Rocky.
thank you.
Our next speaker is Ed Pullen.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Good.
I gave you 4 photographs. The first one is my driveway, where you can see the horse trail's about 2.5 feet above it. Without those sandbags, it all comes down into my driveway. Second picture shows you, like I said in my letter that Rocky presented to you, that the horses tear up the sandbags. You'll see a torn sandbag. I think they're more of a hazard for a horse to stumble and get hurt there. And then walking the dogs this afternoon, I noticed a property that looks like it's on Broken Feather, but it's actually on Norco Drive. But then I learned there's something in 2011 that says you can do certain things that you can't do today. I believe in no exceptions, but It should be uniform so that everybody is up playing by the same rules. We've been lucky this year because there hasn't been much rain. But April showers bring May flowers, so we may still have some. But I thank you for your time and
Thank you, sir.
consideration.
No further comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Dana. Okay, we're going to move into the consent calendar. Are there any council members that need to pull any items? And hearing none, I'll ask for a motion. Have a motion and a second.
Please vote. Went red for some reason. Can I take your vote, Councilman? Yes? Okay. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into discussion items. And the way we're going to present this is the staff report, council questions of staff, public comment, council discussion and action. And I'll call upon our Acting Public Works Director, Nelson, to lead us in the rate study and discussion and recommendations. Good evening.
Thank you. Oh, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So item number 5A is the water, sewer, and recycle rate study discussion and recommendations. We actually have the consultant in the audience to present the slideshow with Stantec.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mayor, members of the council. Dave Hyder with Stantec. It's a pleasure to see everybody again. I'm going to go through the rate study, and we do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. In terms of the discussion this evening, I'm going to go over the study objectives. We'll talk about some of the key issues that we're seeing for the water and the sewer fund, talk about some of the assumptions. Then we'll move into the recommended financial plan. Last meeting, we talked about a bunch of different financial plans. This time, we'll talk about our recommendations. We'll then look at the water and sewer rate designs, look at how the financial plans would impact customers, and then we'll wrap up with looking at the recycled water rates. So just an overview again in terms of the study objectives. So these are comprehensive water and sewer rate studies. We're also looking at establishing rates for recycled water. Our study looked at over a 10-year projection period, so we're looking at the full cost of providing water and sewer service over a 10-year projection period, including reinvestments in the system. And ultimately, the goal of the financial plans is to develop and ensure sustainable and resilient operations for the water and sewer systems. And that accounts for variations in water use, variations in expenditures, and again, reinvestments in the system. We've also looked at your current water and sewer rates, and we have some recommendations in terms of the structure. And then, as I mentioned, we'll wrap up talking about recycled water rates. So in terms of the overall process, we talked about this last time, but just high level again, we're developing revenue requirements, which is the total cost of operating the water and sewer systems. So we need to account for the operations cost, any existing debt, any reinvestments in the system, whether that be cash funded capital or the issuance of new debt. And that gives us a picture of the 10-year forecast of expenditures. And then we compare that to a revenue forecast, taking your current rates, knowing what we know about how demands are changing, forecasting customer growth in the system. And then we can compare the expenditures with the revenues and see if our revenues are sufficient to meet those revenue requirements. We have some financial policies we want to make sure we meet in terms of reserve targets and debt service coverage requirements. So that's the big picture overview. We talked about this last time as well, but some of the key issues that we're seeing on the water fund, as it stands right now, is the water fund is facing financial pressure. And that's the result of reductions in water sales as well as cost increases over the last several years. It's important to note that water rates have remained constant since fiscal year 2021. That was the last time water rates were adjusted. Over the last 3 years, water rates sales have decreased by about 18%. So that's due to conservation, aging water meters, things of that sort. And the reason that's important is because about 50% of your revenues are generated from water usage. So that has a direct impact on your revenues. We're also seeing water costs increase in terms of the operational cost due to inflationary increases and supply chain issues related to COVID. We've really seen that since 2022. That's when the operational costs really took off. We're also seeing, in addition to those operational costs, the issue with revenues being down is we don't have enough revenues to fund the operations of this water system going forward, nor do we have revenues to fund the critical water projects such as meter replacements, main line replacements, things of that sort. So that's where we are right now. I did want to talk a little bit. Mayor Pro Tem asked the last meeting, how did the last plan come out in terms of how it played out? And the reality is, with the increases that occurred from 2017 to 2021, the revenues and expenditures were actually pretty closely aligned with what we anticipated. So that was a good thing. But really what's happened since that point in time is listed on the slide here. So costs have increased. We really saw a jump in 2022. We haven't raised rates, and so revenues have declined as a result. And so the financial plan really did hold. It's just that we haven't adjusted rates, and so we're now in the position that we're in. So hopefully that makes sense. Just wanted to provide a little bit of comparison. So really 2 reasons for showing this slide. One is just to show you how much consumer goods have gone up over the past 4 years. These are on a per gallon basis. So gas, milk, if you're buying these things on a per gallon basis. Orange juice has gone up 72%, soft drinks 60%. But the other reason to show it is just to show in comparison to what people pay for Norco water. Per gallon, it's currently less than a cent per gallon for Norco water. It's been that way for the past 4 years. And so just to give you kind of people don't often realize how cheap water is in comparison to other goods. If you compare that to bottled water, if you turn that into a per gallon basis, it's obviously a lot more. So just to put that into perspective. And then the last little bit of history, just in terms of what's been accomplished since the last rate study. So the city did adopt the rate increases that were projected for 2017 through 2021. One of the primary reasons for adopting those was to address capital, and you have been able to address capital. You've invested $26.5 million in the water system. You've been able to replace 6.5 miles of line, which is the most significant one. So those were successful increases. They have allowed you to address the system, but the reality is there's still critical projects that need to take place. Identified about $36 million worth of failing water mains and significant water loss due to leaks. So there's still work to do in the system. So this evening I've got 2 financial plans. We looked at a number last time. The first is scenario A, and again, this is the busy looking dashboard for the financial model that essentially shows the 10-year projection period. This scenario A is full capital, so assuming we try to accomplish the majority of the capital in the next 5 years. We are proposing that you issue low interest rate loans for $21 million of that capital. And what would be required in order to maintain your minimum cash balance, which you can see for the operating fund here, would be the increases that are shown up at the top. So we're looking at about a 17% increase in this next fiscal year, 26, and then a 10%, and then a 6, and a 4. So ultimately, this evening, we are talking about a 5-year rate plan. So you can see what the rate increases would need to be with that more compressed capital. Alternative B, or scenario B, is to extend the capital, so accomplish the same projects, just do it over a longer period of time, still using debt to fund $21 million worth of projects. You can see under this plan, if we do extend it, we would be able to levelize the rate increases. It would be a 9% in 26, a 9% in 27, and then an 8, and a 6, and a 6. So next slide just shows a comparison of the 2. So the annual capital spending, so under the scenario A, you do about $40 million worth of projects over the 6-year period. Scenario B, you do $31 million. You can see the rate increases as they compare. And then ultimately what the customer bill would be with the rate increases under scenario A versus scenario B. So now we'll talk about sewer, and then I'll come up with recommendations for the financial plan. So sewer is not facing as much pressure as the water system, but you are seeing increasing cost. You have seen slight declines in sales, and you also haven't raised rates in the sewer system for over a decade. So rates have stayed the same for over 10 years. Sewer sales have decreased about 6% over the last 3 years. Due to increasing cost, as well as the need to address capital, we are recommending that you adjust rates. But again, it's not as significant in terms of the need on the sewer side. Again, flashing back to the prior rate study, I did want to point out, just in terms of how the performance was in the last rate study, there were recommendations for rate increases in the last 3 years of the rate plan. Those rate increases didn't happen. But the reason that the sewer fund is in good financial position today, or still solid, is because we had forecasted spending about $17 million worth of capital in the sewer system, and you've done about $4 million. So that's the primary reason for the success in the sewer system from that perspective. So 2 financial plan scenarios on the sewer side. Similarly, we're looking at what if we try to accomplish the capital in the near term, what would need to be done in terms of sewer rates. So we'd be looking at about 6% in 26, 6% in 27, 5, and then 3 and 3 in 2029 and 2030. We also looked at a more extended plan, so scenario B would be extending out the capital. There's not as much capital to extend out, so it doesn't have as much of an impact as the water fund. But this would allow us to do 5%, 5%, 4%, 4%, 4% in terms of the adjustments. So summarizing again, there's not as much capital to extend, so there's not a lot of difference between scenario A and B. But you can see that scenario B does provide a little bit of relief in terms of the increases. Just a reminder that residential customers just pay a flat sewer charge, $51 per month, and you can see how that would adjust with the rate plan. So based upon our review, what we would recommend is to move forward with extending the CIP. I think that allows you to have more gradual water and sewer rate adjustments. If you needed to, if there's emergency repairs, you could obviously accelerate projects more aggressively in the future, but we do think that extending it would make sense. I also think it makes sense to take advantage of low interest rate loans on the water side, given the magnitude of capital projects. Those loans would align the repayment of the asset with the life of the assets, and it also allows you to moderate the rate increases. So the recommended rate adjustments are shown here. These would all be effective July 1 of each year at the beginning of the fiscal year. Okay. So we'll keep rolling, and now we'll look at the actual water and sewer rates. So far, we've been just talking about financial plans, but this is how you actually charge for service. So on the left-hand side, we have your current water rates, which are scaled by meter size. You have a fixed monthly charge that's scaled by meter size. And this fixed monthly charge is assessed regardless of use. So if somebody uses no water, they still pay this fixed charge to have the availability of service. And then if you do use water, you pay $2.70 per 100 cubic feet for that use. The amount of revenue that you generate from that fixed charge represents about 50% of your water usage charges, and the other 50% comes from the variable usage charge. And then on the sewer side, you do have the fixed charge for all residential customers. They pay $51 regardless of how much water they use, sewage they generate. If you're a non-residential customer, once you use over 10 HCF, 100 cubic feet, you pay $8 per 100 cubic feet. And then you also have a non-connect charge for customers that are not connected to the sewer system. That's $19 per month. The fixed revenue generated on the sewer system is about 60%, 40% is variable. Based upon our cost of service analysis and looking at your rate design, we wouldn't recommend any changes to the rate structure. You have a relatively high portion of your revenues are fixed, which is a good thing, protects you from that revenue volatility when people use less water. So no recommended changes in the structure. So if we apply those rate increases that I talked about before for the water system, this is what the rates would look like. So again, your current fixed charge and then the usage rate, and then applying those percentage increases, you can see how the fixed charges would increase over the next 5 years, as well as the usage rates. And then on the sewer side, again, same scenario, applying those rate increases, and what the results would be are shown here. The monthly fixed charge would go from $51 at the start to about $63 by 2030. And the usage rate would go from $8 to about $9.92 by 2030. We are not including the non-connect fee in this analysis. It's not a service fee. And so technically that has to be done in a different type of study. And so that is not being adjusted at this time. So now I just have some comparisons of customer bills. So the vast majority of your customers are residential in nature. They have 3/4 inch meters. Typical use, you can see at 20 HCF. Their current bill would be about $101. That would go up to $111, about a $9 per month increase. The next year it would go up another $9, close to $10, and then in 2028 would be $9.59. And on the sewer side, the monthly change would be about $250 in the first year, $268 in the second, and then $225 in the third year. And then just to show all together over the 5-year projection period, again, for the typical residential customer, current bill going from $152 up to $164. So it's about averaging about $11 per month each year, given the rate increases that are recommended. Commercial customers, vast majority of your commercial customers have a 3/4 or 1 inch meter. This is what their bills would be at various ranges. There's really no average commercial customer, so you can kind of look across the board how much their bill would increase. Obviously, the more water you use, the more your bill is going to go up on a dollar basis. And then similarly, on the sewer side, once you use over 10 HCF, you start paying that per HCF charge. And so you can see how typical non-residential sewer bills would be impacted with the increases. So wanted to provide a little bit of comparison, just some surrounding jurisdictions, what the current water and sewer bill is versus what the city's is currently, and then what it would be under fiscal year 26. So you can see you are kind of in the middle of the range, towards the top with the fiscal year 26 increase. One thing that's really, really important to note, though, is that this is somewhat of an apples to oranges when we look at fiscal year 26, because this is current bills and rates. We don't know what other jurisdictions are going to do for 26 yet. And so likely most communities do adjust rates on an annual basis. So that should be kept in mind. And then the last section before we get into the recycled water rates is you do have private fire protection charges. These are charges that are assessed to commercial customers that have private fire lines that are serving their building. These charges are assessed based on the size of the line. It's really a standby charge. Hopefully you don't have a fire and don't need to use water, but if you do, there's a usage rate for that. Consistent with a financial plan, we're recommending adjustments to the fire line charges as well. And that can be seen here on the screen. All right, so last section is recycled water rates. A little bit of background in terms of the recycled water system. So the city currently doesn't provide recycled water within the city, but you do have approximately 6 miles of dry lines. So lines that have been put in place in the past. They've been in place for a number of years, but they're not currently in service. So the city is engaged in a partnership with RCRA and other member agencies to facilitate the development of a regional recycled water system. That regional system includes a booster pump station as well as a pipeline to convey the recycled water to the member communities from the RCRA plant. It's estimated that all these projects would be completed by early calendar year 2026. And so the city's been planning for this for quite some time. The city did transfer $3.2 million from the sewer fund to a newly created recycled water fund to provide some initial funding for the system. And you do have a resolution where 2 years after recycled water begins to be delivered, you will start paying that back over a 25-year period. So we've looked at all the costs as well as the potential demands, and we've come up with some recommended recycled water rates. So in terms of the costs, that's what's shown here. The operating costs, operating costs in year one would be about $200,000. So that would include internal operating and maintenance, so expenditures for operating, maintaining the water system within the city, as well as shared pipeline O&M costs. Yeah, I'm gonna grab a drink. Sorry. Thank you. So you have shared pipeline O&M costs as well as the booster pump station O&M costs. So in total, we're estimating that in the first year, it's going to cost about $200,000 to operate the recycled water system from the city's perspective. And then the next table down below just shows the detail of the capital costs. So the total capital costs associated with the recycled water system is about $7 million. 1.1 million would be for the internal capital. So for the lines, bringing those up to date, as well as other construction that would be required internally to the city. You're also sharing in the cost of the pipeline, which would be about 2.7 million, and then sharing in the cost of the booster pump station. In terms of how these are going to be funded, you do have grants for the internal capital. Half of that is funded from a Riverside County flood control grant. And then the other half would be funded through that sewer loan that you've taken from the sewer fund. The pipeline cost share would be funded through a JCSD loan. So they've offered you a loan, pay that back over 20 years at a really favorable interest rate, 0.8%. And then the booster pump station would be funded through a grant. You've received about a $2.2 million US EPA community grant to fund a portion of that, and then the other portion, $700,000, would be funded through the sewer fund loan. So that's the, the capital and the funding. So when we roll all this together, did look at two different scenarios. So scenario A would be if you have to fully fund all the capital, which that is the operating costs shown there, plus the payment of the sewer loan, plus the JCSD pipe loan. So total year one costs of about $300,000 going up to about $500,000. If you were to receive an additional US EPA grant, which I believe we've learned that you haven't received that and likely not going to receive that. So scenario B is not really a possibility at this point. But at the time, we thought maybe you would get another significant grant. So scenario A is really the what we're looking at. So finally, in terms of the demands in the system, there have been several properties that have identified desire for recycled water. They're listed here: the Sports Complex, the Neil Snips Park, the Pikes Peak Park, and the Navy's Lake Norconian. The initial estimate is about 350 acre-feet per year, and we're assuming that that would grow about 1% per year. There is a potential for future sales to outside agencies. So if RCRA is able to sell recycled water outside to other agencies, Norco would be provided a proportional share of those sales and that revenue. So that would help the recycled water system. So in terms of the recommended recycled water rates, we are recommending a structure similar to the potable water rates, which would be a fixed charge, which would cover a portion of the capital. It's not very much, about 8 or 9% of the capital, which would be the loan and the pipeline costs. And then an operational rate per 100 cubic feet. So in the first year, fixed charge of $23.82 for 3/4 inch meter and $2.21 per 100 cubic feet for usage. And then that would increase over time as the cost increase, as well as the reason for the sizable jump in year 2 is because you have to begin paying back the loan to the sewer fund. So I'm going to skip over. This was the potential water rates if you were to receive that additional grant, which we have not received. So that brings me to my summary recommendations. So we are recommending that water and sewer rates be adjusted. I think they're necessary to maintain the financial health and viability of the water and sewer funds. These rate adjustments will allow you to keep the revenues on the water system in line with the cost of providing service, as well as completing these important capital projects in both funds, water and sewer. In order to moderate the rate increases, we are recommending that you extend the capital and that you also do use low interest rate loans for the water capital projects. And then we think it is prudent and appropriate to adopt recycled water rates to allow for the provision of and funding of recycled water service in the city. And so that brings us to the next steps. In terms of if the recommended rates are approved, the next steps would essentially be to, by April 7th, mail out the required public notices for the Prop 218 rate hearing. Then on June 4th, the rate hearing could take place to consider the adoption of the potential rate adjustments. And then each fiscal year, you would have the option to implement the rates or not, consistent with how you've operated in the past. But the first year that rates would be effective would be this July with the rate adjustments. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Council, have any questions? Greg, you want to start?
How much money are we gonna be saving on the recycled water? For like our, because that, we're only using that just for our parks, am I correct? Or
Yeah.
does it go to commercial too?
It would be the identified, and I'll have Sam, I'm not as familiar with some of the recycled water system, but it would be parks as well as, yeah, essentially the sports complex.
Yeah. Currently, it would be the parks. The future would be putting, serving it to residents and commercial businesses as infrastructure gets installed.
And would that, because like the 2-inch ag lines, are those a part of the, I didn't see those anywhere on that. We do have commercial agriculture lines?
Irrigation lines,
Yeah,
those are domestic.
okay. That's it.
Robin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably more for staff. Sam, do you know how many lots in Norco pay the non-connect fee, or just like a ballpark? Oh, is that, you know?
Yeah, there's about an estimate about 250 that
Okay.
pay the sewer connect.
And then I know you mentioned that that's a different process. Can
Right.
we maybe put that on a future agenda to look at that non-connect fee and increasing that? I just think, I know that or my understanding is when a house sells and it's not connected, it has to be connected to the sewer, but I'm just wondering how many like potential code compliance issues and other things come up with folks that are not connected to the sewer, and $19 a month is not really anything in comparison to what residents that are connected are paying. So if we can maybe put that on an agenda for later. And then I had a question for you. You had the different cities listed and their prices on that chart. And you said it's not, apples to apples, but I did have a question because our fixed costs in Norco, we have lower housing density, right, than our neighbors. So is that accounted for in your comparison here?
No,
Our
I mean-
housing density versus theirs?
No, you are very unique in terms of your housing density, your usage profiles in terms of the 20 HCF per house. And so, yeah, it's apples to oranges in that it's not the same 2026 as compared to 2025, and also you do have a very different system than these other systems, for sure.
Okay, so it would be fair to say, looking at this then, our residents are going to have a larger burden to bear in terms of fixed costs because there are fewer of us to carry the
Correct.
load as
Correct.
compared to our neighbors, right?
Correct, you don't have the
Okay.
economies of scale, correct.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Robin. Via? Kevin, any questions at this time?
I just have two. Did you, on page 15, did you say the loan is 0.8%?
It is,
0.8%?
yes.
So it's like free money.
Yeah, it's a good deal.
Yeah, and then my same question along with Robin is, we always talk about the fact that we have more houses, less houses on the street than, let's say, Eastvale, but a mile of road is still still $1 million. The same would apply to pipes, all the work that we get done, so the burden has to be greater.
Yes, absolutely. The economies of scale are not as, exactly to that point, essentially, that
And then
infrastructure costs
just
the same.
so we're clear, I didn't like your analogy between the beer and the wine, because we don't wash in beer and we don't wash in wine, so I'm kind of
True.
like, so I didn't quite like that analogy. Thank you.
I hear you.
I thought the wine you drank came in boxes from Oklahoma.
It's a good point.
On page 8, this is on capital investments, and you're showing on the water system, water main replacement, 6.5 miles at $12.7 million is what we've spent. Is that just specifically water main, or is that the entire street project? Curb, gutter, storm drain, paving?
I believe that was
Because
just
that's
the
going to be
water
my
line.
assumption.
Yeah.
So I question that we're paying right under $2 million a mile for just water line replacement? It's got to be the entire street project.
Typically, it's the new water main, new hydrants, new valves, new water services, and it adds up.
'Cause we've been looking at, for the longest time, because Councilmember Bash mentioned it, like, it used to be $1 million a mile for the entire project, streets, water, right, curb, gutter. And then we found that had doubled over the years. It used to be $183 a lineal foot, Sam, okay? And that would get us a mile. And so now we were looking at some of our street replacement work where we did water, et cetera, and that was running at about $2 million a mile. So I'm kind of questioning that on this investment, just water main replacement, 6 miles, we've spent almost $13 million. Something's not working in my brain on that.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the streets, like, I don't know the actual distance by heart, but I know that water lines between, like, on a street like Corona Avenue, between 4th and 5th, or 5th and 6th, are between 1 and 1.5 million. I just don't know the length.
Okay. All right. I'd like us to kind of maybe dwell a little deeper in that. And then when we were talking about, like, with the water and the sewer financial plan, the scenario be to extend 5-year CIP to a 10-year plan. One of my concerns with CIP is that right now, when we're at a 5-year plan, we end up with a lot of carryover projects. With 5-year, if we were, understand the financial savings going to a 10-year plan, but when we take that next 5, my concern is that we're just going to have a shopping list of carryover projects.
In terms of, I'm not sure I follow exactly.
Yeah,
carryover.
it's just, okay, there's a financial benefit, right, to go to the 10-year. But are we really going to accomplish, those projects? Because we typically have so many carryover projects that it's like, this year is like, no new projects, let's catch up on our carryover. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
project down the road,
Yeah.
right, with a 10-year plan.
Yeah, I think I can speak to what we've seen in terms of the last plan was, I think actually in the 2016 rate study, we had anticipated you'd do about, I want to say $20 million worth of capital. and you actually accomplished more. You've done about 26. So I think there has been a ramp-up period where you've actually accomplished more
yeah.
capital
Yeah.
pretty aggressively. I know on the sewer side, that was slower, but from what I understand, you are ramping up to where that's going to be done. But is the concern that if you extend it to a 10-year, that you just don't get the work done? And it'd be better to compress it into a 5 to try to get it done more aggressively?
Well, I mean, let's say for the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've had a very aggressive plan, and we've been knocking a lot of the work out, but still carryover projects. So I'm not worried about us still approaching it aggressively. It's just, on a 10-year plan, to me, it just seems like we're gonna end up with more carryover stuff, even if we're aggressive with it. Just something I think we have to weigh, because we have to kind of make that decision tonight on which scenario.
Right.
Okay. And then, as far as the recommended water rates, I'm in complete agreement with you. We pay less than 3/100ths of a cent a gallon for water, and it's the water's cheap. It's the delivery system that we have to, just the way it is based on our customer base.
Yep.
But I'm a little fuzzy on my sewer math here, okay? And going through this, and this is just basically on the recommended sewer rates. Today, our monthly fixed charge, $51 a month for residential.
Correct.
Correct. And our usage charge per 100 cubic feet is $8. So it's,
Yeah, that's only for
Right.
commercial.
well, you're correct. But taking that further, just,
Sure.
it's, the way I was figuring it, so we're charging $6 and change per 100 cubic feet, right? If we're at $8 to get to the 51, right? Is that math somewhat close?
Yeah.
Yeah, the fixed charge. Well, go back to, I got it on, it's table 4.3.
Is that in the presentation?
No, it's in our,
Okay.
it's in our long report
Sure.
that I read.
I appreciate you reading.
I told you, I'd take
I
a
guess,
shot from yesterday.
let me take a
It's like page 78.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
the same. So if I go to, I think it's this one. This looks the same as table 4.3.
Right.
So I think one way to think about it, so if you're a residential customer, you only pay $51 regardless of how much you
Right.
use. If you're a commercial customer, you pay $51 until you use more than 10.
Okay.
And so I think the math you were doing is essentially if you take
The 8 into 51.
the 8 into 51,
Right.
you're essentially paying for 6.375
Yep.
HCF.
Yep.
And that's essentially the math. And
Yeah.
we wouldn't recommend changing that at this point.
No, but like I said, I just started playing with it because the overall magnitude is that we put approximately 1,800,000 gallons to the Rickwell plant every day.
Yep.
That's a lot. And it's like trying to justify that unit cost to that magnitude. It's just something I was like playing with going, to me, our numbers are very competitive if that's our overall volume that we're doing daily.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I think on the sewer side, you are very competitive. Again, you haven't raised them for 10 years, and
You're right, exactly.
and I think that does show up on the comparison. You can see generally the sewer rates are lower in these other jurisdictions, but yeah.
Right. So, like I said, to me, that seemed like a lot of volume. That's all I have at this time as far as questions. No other questions? Dana, do we have any public comment?
Yes, we have one public comment. Mr. Chad Blaze.
Good evening, Mr. Blaze.
Set the clock to 50 minutes, please.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, council. It's good to
Hi,
be back.
Chad.
Appreciate it. So I want to at least touch base on some of your questions that you had. As far as the non-connects, just so you know, Robin, BB&K, who reviewed the rate study, identified that because it's not a service fee, that it can't be done with the same legal process. It actually has to go through a mail ballot process. So totally different, which is much more difficult to do, to get it increased. So they let us know that we couldn't do it through this same process, which is more service fees. So that's going to be a different process that the staff will have to take on or choose to take on because it's much more difficult.
Is it a ballot to every residential customer or only the non-connect?
Only the non-connect.
Oh, man. All right, well, that's.
And just a clarification regarding the cost that we've expended over the years for like water main, et cetera. So you got to keep in mind, I don't recall in my tenure ever saying what the cost of a mile per water line is. You know, we've talked about streets, et cetera. The reality is that most of our pipe segments we do aren't a mile. There may be half a mile at most, but they're still, especially these last couple of years, coming in at 1.5 million, 1.8 million. So if you're now doing a mile, those costs are much higher. So the costs are what they are. They certainly were cheaper earlier on in our 9 years of doing this heavy infrastructure, but they've definitely gone up more, probably almost, close to double on certain projects. But I'm very confident the numbers do reflect the true cost for building the infrastructure and the linear footage that we have. But I don't recall us ever expressing a mile per pipe or what it may cost, et cetera. We've done a lot of discussion about what it is for paving for a mile, but even then, that's just more of discussion purposes. It's just gotten more expensive for everything. And regarding the sewer rates, the biggest driver on sewer or water, but the biggest driver on sewer rates in regards to what our cost is competitive, everything we're doing is about capital. It's just incredibly expensive to do capital. And for water or sewer, if you want to complete the projects that have been proposed to you as part of this rate study, you have to do the rate increases that you're proposing. Or the simple choice is you don't do those projects and you do a much lower rate increase just to make sure that you're just covering your costs for O&M and you don't do any work. You are at that point with the water for sure. You don't have money to even do the projects you have now. So that's a consideration you have to do. You have some money that's in sewer, but you have multiple projects that are currently unfinished that will eat a lot of that once they're finished and they get done. The benefit of the 10-year plan is it pushes these projects out to give more breathing room to get them done in a more meaningful way and not give yourself so little time to get them done. But that's really what you're struggling with now is just trying to decide if you want to do the projects that staff is proposing that have been defined as being critical or not do them at all. And that's really where you're stuck with. Thank you.
Do you have any more to add? Believe me, I hate to ask you that, but you're well-versed in this subject.
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the information that you have to make an informed decision. And keep in mind, tonight is just given the opportunity, which the staff is looking for, is to at least put out to the public, there's a proposed increase. It's not being approved tonight. It's just giving the ability to at least mail it. And then the public will have the ability to give you feedback on whether they think of that, where you might help glean whether you're for or against it or indifferent, or if you have other questions you still want answered. It gives staff and the consultant time to come up with that information that you might think help resolve some of your unanswered questions so that you can make an informed decision. I certainly understand from your perspective, doing any type of increase on anything is never palatable. But it is part of what you're asked to do as the electeds because you're responsible for the maintenance of a fully functional water system, sewer system, soon-to-be recycled water system, and it costs, unfortunately, this community dramatically more because you do not have the rooftops. If you had the triple amount of rooftops, quadruple amount of rooftops like your neighbors have, you'd be in a far different position as far as the rates that we're asking you to increase. You'd have more people to pay for it. This is the luxury of your lifestyle. It has a cost to it. And that's just always going to be there. It's never going to get any better. I'm just being candid, but this is Norco. It's the beauty of what Norco is, to have what you have and to not rely on other providers outside it, that you control it, and for still a reasonable price, it's what it's going to cost to do that. So I just think those are the things you have to weigh and balance, whether you think it's just beyond the pale of what this community can afford. What is going to suffer is the capital improvement, which the residents also suffer. In the report, it does talk about 188 main breaks over an 8-year period. There were 5 alone in this last month on Roundup and on Trail that interrupted those folks' lives over and over again on a weekend at night, and they just have patchwork that's there. And that's the other consideration, is if you can't get to this capital, you're never going to fix your roads because the water lines are impacting them significantly. So otherwise, you're going to patch the road, and it's going to break underneath that fresh asphalt, and it doesn't make any sense to permanently fix a road. So that's just the concern, that was proposed in desire for the capital, was temper the speed of doing things, meaning give us more time to get it done so everything's getting done. But at the same time, still keeping those things on the list because they're still all critical. And that's the goal, I think, what staff has come up with, the consultant, is a prudent recommendation that recognizes the needs and tries to temper what we're asking for. Worst case scenario, if they don't build it, you're just not expending the revenue, but it may cost you more if you keep pushing it too far, because now that costs just go up and up and up. So it would be prudent on staff to keep up with the schedule, get it done in the cost that projected at that time. But I have all the confidence in the staff that they can do what's being proposed here. It's a very prudent and reasonable process. It's just whether or not it's what you believe is appropriate for the community, and I understand that perspective.
Thank you, Chad.
I have no further comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Dana. I'll bring it back to council discussion, action. Kevin?
Can we just reiterate the 2 choices? So I'm totally clear, just in a nutshell, both of them, please.
I think our recommendation was the scenario B, which was essentially a moderated increases in water and sewer rates, 9% the first year for water and 5% for sewer. And an alternative option would be to compress the capital and do higher rate increases. But again, our recommendation and what's prepared to go out at the Prop 218 notice would be those recommended rates under scenario B.
Thank you.
Yeah. Robin?
David, I just want to say thank you for responding to my email questions. And just to reiterate, and I know you mentioned it in the presentation, but I had asked you to look at your 2016 report and then what you had projected and compare that to the actuals. And again, your report was very, very close in the information that you shared. So that does give me confidence in the work that your team does, because what you projected came very close to what actually happened in our community. So thank you for getting back to me with that, and Sam for coordinating that and getting that done. It goes to what Chad said. We have a unique lifestyle here, and there's some costs that are associated with that. So I think extending it out to give breathing room to staff on projects and not stressing you guys out with a big pile of work, and moderating the rate increases will be important. As we move along this path and we try and get more agriculture in town, I do want to look and see if there's ways that we can help, the 4% of residents that don't have the 3/4 inch line or maybe have the 2-inch irrigation lines. Those are pretty hefty fees, I know from personal experience. So, if we can look at making sure we're supporting agriculture in our community and the large lots and the boarding facilities and the estates and some of those. I would certainly like to be able to do that moving forward, but thank you for your work. I think it's just a necessity that we probably proceed with the recommendations.
Greg?
Yeah, I just got a question. And this is probably for Colin, Sam, all three of you guys. Is there any way that we can minimize the pay increase that we need to have to update all this stuff? I totally agree with it, but I'm totally against raising our rates. But is there any way that we can just do a softer rate increase and then put more of that on commercial? Or is that even something we can even address? Instead of making our commercial buildings pay for our infrastructure, as far as do a smaller increase that really doesn't affect people, but then go to the commercial side and put more into that so it doesn't hit the citizens as much. That was just my thought. I just thinking out loud.
I can comment on that. In order to be compliant with industry practice and state statutes and things like that, so we'd essentially have to kind of tear the rates apart and do a cost of service to look at, does it cost more to serve commercial than it does residential? You currently have one size fits all rate structure, with the exception of on the sewer side, where, you know, if you use more, you pay that. So that would be a significant effort to do something like that. You can't just arbitrarily do it, or you would be you'd likely be sued by the commercial property owners. You can do it. Yes, you certainly can do it.
Well,
And I'm not a lawyer, so
No, I
let the
agree,
lawyer
I
speak.
agree, but the fees have to have a nexus between the total cost of the fee and what the actual service is that's provided. So to the extent that a commercial property has different costs associated, there's going to be different costs associated with the size of the line, the length of the line, everything else going into a commercial property versus a residential property. So we really are supposed to look at, you know, how much does a certain segment of pipe cost? How much does it cost to install it? Okay, what does a typical residential property require for one segment of pipe? And we're supposed to have a nexus and a formula for doling it out that way. That's why it's hard to transfer some of the costs from one type of property over to the other. We even have to break it down to, within residential, you know, different size of pipes within residential. So they really do get categorized into type of property, type of pipe, type of use, size, and that's why it's hard to take commercial property and use those funds to pay for the portion of the residential.
You okay? You good with that? You good with that explanation?
No.
Okay. One question I forgot to ask earlier, and this is on the recycled water, that, I mean, years ago, yeah, we ran it down Fifth Street to Pikes Peak Park and all that. I swear for the last 20 years that Norco Ridge Ranch had recycled water roughed in when that was being developed. Okay. Would you? Because when I go back through the specific plan, I just recall that. The condition, what it would be in, maybe we can't, you know, reuse it. But, okay, would you, Sam? Because I'm sure that it was part of the specific plan. Whether the developer put it in fully is another question. Doesn't it, Kevin? Because remember, we ran it to Pikes Peak Park. And I'm pretty sure that, just check that for me, would you? And other than that, appreciate all your work, your report. I think everything, you answered my questions, everything seems valid.
I have one just
Yeah.
to sort of address what Greg said. When I first got on council, and Greg, you remember this, the previous city council really did not keep up with the times, and they were afraid, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but for election purposes, they didn't want to raise any rates. So we had to do a huge, huge pay raise, just to do the most minimal stuff. And what I'm afraid of is that if we don't do this, as much as I don't want to raise rates either, especially right now with the climate that we have, the economic climate, I don't think we have a choice, because next year and next year, things are going to get more and more expensive. And there's things coming down the pike with the state about water. I mean, the really neat one is all our lawns are supposed to die. I mean, there's some really cool things coming at us, which, by the way, means all the rates, we lose money then. Right. And so I think, unfortunately, we have to keep up with the times. I always talk about the greatest gift I was given when I got on council was the water and sewer rates, because it was a nightmare. And people fought us, but we did it. So I'm in favor of the recommendation. I would actually go a little higher, but I'll go with the recommendation. And that's a motion.
Well, I was just going to ask you, Colin, do we need to read out the entire recommendation on this to implement the Prop 218 hearing?
You don't, but I assume the motion is on B?
Or
Yes.
item B?
For the
Okay.
recommendation.
On scenario B, correct?
Yes.
Please vote.
Thank you again.
Thank you, appreciate the opportunity.
I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
Okay. I swear this time I hit the wrong button.
Hold on. Okay. Please revote. All council will need to revote. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I wanted that to be a final going away present to Chad.
And motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Try to get my nickel back. We're good? Okay, thank you. All right, let's move into city council staff communications. Staff, Dana. Sam, welcome to the hot seat. Amanda? Colin?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lisette? Alma? Okay. City council, Mr. Bowen? I'm good. Robin? Thea?
Oh, yeah, don't forget the yard sale, I'm sorry.
I'd like to have a discussion about e-bikes and have it put on an agenda for a future council meeting, please.
You'll be voting on bringing back a discussion on e-bikes. Okay. Please vote. Motion passes with Mayor Pro Tem Grunmeyer voting no. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for you? No. Kevin?
Amanda, please tell your folks that the Peppermint Ridge event was wonderful. I was very happy with how you set up the entire Vietnam Day, and the Quilts of Valor was really, really good. I really appreciate it. I have this feeling that your staff is really into it, and so I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Kevin. Same Amanda. Saturday night, your staff was working. You have a good group. They show that they care. Colin, I have a question first on motion to reconsider. Is that a majority, or does that have to be a 4/5 majority to reconsider an action?
It's a majority.
Majority?
But so under Robert's Rules of Order, on a motion to reconsider, a person in the majority needs to be one of the persons who makes the motion.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to make a motion. This goes back to our, a motion to reconsideration to our staff report from March 19th, item 3G on the consent calendar. And this was obviously a recommendation to receive and file Streets, Trails, Utilities Commission recommendation, not to amend the trail standard, but to the exception that was brought up at that time, and again tonight in public comments, to relook specifically at that one residence situation. Oh, and I wanted to add to that motion also that any current code enforcement issues be stayed temporarily until and if we have this discussion at our next council meeting on the motion to reconsider. Okay.
Please vote. It's not on the e-bikes. It's weird, it's showing the wrong thing. There we go. There it goes. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, so thank you all for attending. Good to see y'all. Have a good night. We're adjourned.